Hello, and my name is Dave Zapponi. I'm the CEO of ECHO, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. I want to thank you for participating in today's community conversation about tree pruning and maintaining healthy trees. We have an expert, a master arborist with us today, so we're really excited about that. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life through education, advocacy, and connecting people. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items, and these are now presented on your screen. You want to take a couple minutes and review those, please. In addition to the slides were sent to all registered participants in today's webinar. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items, and if you didn't receive the slides, make sure you let Connor know, and he'll send you the link for that. You'll note that we have a chat icon. The chat icon is to be used to report any technical issues that you may have or experience during the meeting. Connor will help you with those, and to communicate directly with participants and the speakers. And you can talk to me directly if you like. Please place your questions, that is your questions, in the Q&A feature, the question and answer feature. We will go through those, and we'll try to answer some of the questions during the presentation via text, or answer all questions during the Q&A period. We'll do as many as we possibly can, and I'll answer only those that I feel qualified to respond to. Questions about specific situations are better asked of your attorney, maybe not in this case, but your attorney serving your association, or an appropriate industry professional familiar with your specific situation. Now let me direct your attention to your monitor, where you'll find our disclaimer. None of what is said during the seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speaker, sponsors, or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney or another suitable expert. The information we provide during this webinar is educational in nature and should not be relied upon for specific decision-making purposes. Although Ian is a master arborist, so he knows what he's talking about. And I want to thank you all for that. And this event is made possible by the contribution of our generous professional service providers. Our premier sponsor today is Reliable Pavement Services, and our Q&A sponsor is CID Consortium LLC. Please support all ECHO professional members, and especially our sponsors. They make our educational programming possible at little or no cost to you. And now just a little bit about Ian, and we're going to let him talk about all his certifications. Ian Ashby is a board-certified master arborist with elite maintenance and tree services. Go ahead, Ian, and take it away from here and let us know a little bit more about your certifications.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, like you mentioned, board certified master arborist, but on top of that, also a registered consulting arborist, certified community and urban forester. I'm also tree risk assessment qualified and a certified tree care safety professional. And that last one there, qualified applicator license, just means that I'm allowed by the state of California to apply chemicals like herbicides and pesticides. So I'm going to get more into detail about what arborists are, because actually there aren't many of us. So a lot of times HOAs, property owners, don't ever really get to interact with an actual certified arborist. And they have a completely different approach to tree care. We're held to a different standard to become an arborist and actually represent the International Society of Arboriculture. So what is an arborist? Well, you actually have to get a certification. There's certain qualifications that you need to have to be able to become one, including, say, taking a test. But we're a professional that specializes in the care and management of trees, shrubs, and other woody plants. That also includes vines. And there's many different accrediting bodies for getting all these different certifications, such as that I have. So the main one is the International Society of Arboriculture, but then there's, say, the American Society of Consulting Arborists, which is primarily what I do. I consult on trees. I no longer climb trees or anything like that. Most people assume arborists are just people that climb trees and trim them like we're tree monkeys. Nope, I sell my brain when it comes to tree care. And then there's also the Society of American Foresters and the Tree Care Industry Association. These are really the governing bodies on what supports a lot of the research and what sets our standards within the industry. So, kind of looking at all the different things, like this is one reason why you might not see that many arborists is because your entry level ISA certified arborist, a lot of them you'll find them in utilities. You don't usually find them in the urban landscape. And it's not necessarily a requirement to go out and trim trees. Usually, actually, when you come across a tree trimming service and they say, I'm licensed, that means they have a contractor's license. They've at least passed some state requirements that allow them to charge you more than, say, $600 or $1,000 on a project. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean they know a whole lot about trees. And like how they live, how they grow, what's the best thing for them. There's still kind of a lot of old school mentality when it comes to maintaining trees. But you can also go and work for municipalities. So for cities, counties, things of that nature. And then also risk assessment. That's a lot of what they do in utility work. And then, of course, the tree climbers, the people that'll actually go up and climb the trees and trim them. But just put in perspective, yeah, there's about 50,000 just regular ISA certified arborists worldwide. It's not very many, but as far as say what I have with the board certified master arborist, there's less than 1,500 of us in the world. And for the registered consulting arborist, that's basically strictly for America, United States, and there's about 500 of us active. So there aren't many of us. It's hard to come by an actual certified arborist to come out and help you with your trees. Like I mentioned, most of them are going to be tied up in the utility line. So getting a hold of somebody such as myself is hard. That's why I love doing something like this because the more you know, the better that you can protect your assets, which is trees. I'll get a little bit more into that. And actually, that one at the bottom there, it says TPAQ and made the Q into an oak leaf. So there's the appraisal part of things. So that's another thing I do is trees actually have a monetary value. They can be appraised. And one thing that I also do is like expert witness work. So I do get called up by attorneys. Tree law is a thing. Uh, Trees fall down, hit a car, hit a person, someone comes onto your property, cuts down your tree. Trees have a value. We get pulled into those things all the time. So some things of why it's important to have an actual certified arborist. I don't care if it's me, but if there's somebody out there in your area that you can get connected with, is that they're going to have a much better, deeper understanding of how the trees work and live. And they've got more experience, like understanding how, like through all the different seasons of how all these different species in your area will react to certain treatments. They can recognize diseases a whole lot better and how to treat those and the management of them. And you also have to sign a code of ethics when you become an ISA certified arborist that says, like, if you don't follow the standards of the industry, say you go out and you top a tree, you could lose your certification. And then you're no longer allowed to be an ISA certified arborist. So what we follow is the ANSI 300 standards, or the American National Standards Institute, and the best management practices from the International Society of Arboriculture and any other sort of supporting literature that's put out by some of the other research scientists and experts in the field. And really, our difference is that we'll provide you with the best solutions for your tree. I'd been asked before, like, well, what's the difference between a just regular tree service and an arborist? It's like, well, we'll actually tell you if you need your trees need to be trimmed at all. A lot of times other regular tree service guys like, oh, trim everything, need to cut down this tree when it might not need to be. It's like, we'll actually direct you for what's the best thing for the tree itself. So why care about them? I mean, trees do have a lot of benefits. I mean, we've got mental health benefits, mood benefits. They clean our air. They actually intercept a lot of dust and particulate matter, the noise reduction, erosion control, cooling effects, of course, like shade. They make privacy screens and all that. But like I mentioned earlier with the appraisals, they actually have a monetary value. Just like anything else on your property, they can actually be appraised similar to that of how a car is appraised. So they are an investment, and that's why it's good to take care of them because they can actually bring some value to your property. So just like with anything else, if you're hoping to maybe sell your property down the line, a lot of times, like such as when I bought my house, one selling factor was we had a lot of really big, nice mature trees and the mature trees of all of our neighbors in the area. But this chart here to the left, it's theoretical. It's something that they've observed of like, say, the cost of maintaining a tree through its maturity. And the benefits that you get out of the tree. So of course, when you first plant the tree, you're gonna have a little bit higher cost. I mean, you have to hire the labor to install it, irrigation work, and then maybe some fertilizer. But as the tree matures, the benefits of that actually go up, and the cost for a mature tree goes down as far as maintenance. You actually don't need to trim your trees as much as you think. You might need to fertilize them a little bit, and that's relatively inexpensive. I mean, of course, if you've got 200 trees, that cost is just naturally going to be higher. But if you go and you don't take care of your trees properly, the cost of that is actually going to start going up. Say if you top your tree, that actually will increase the amount of money it's going to take over the years to maintain that tree. And I'll get more into a little bit of the biology of that later. But let's see here. A little history on trees, just because I find trees very neat. They're about 385 million years old. And the ones that we mostly recognize today, like our pines and redwoods, came around about 320 to 300 million years ago, with the oldest living tree right now being a bristlecone, around 5,000 years old. And there's approximately 73,000 different trees in the world, different species. So a lot of times if I don't know a tree off the top of my head when I see it, I'm like, well, I can't memorize all 73,000 of them. Like, there's no way. But locally, still know quite a few. But I think the most interesting one is the ginkgo biloba. It's the oldest tree that we have that has not genetically changed at all, and it's not related to really anything else other than pine trees, but it's basically straight line for itself since its inception. So about 200 million years old that particular tree is. And what's really interesting is the fossil records, they can actually see the fluctuations of carbon dioxide in the air based off of their stomata. So those are these little tiny pores on the bottom of the leaf. They open and close to actually allow carbon dioxide to come in, and then they release water. So the amount of those on the leaf will actually change based on how much carbon dioxide is in the air. So they can actually look at fossils of these leaves, see those stomata, and count them and actually determine how much carbon dioxide was in the air at any given point in time, if they can accurately date that particular fossil. So pretty interesting thing that they use to track those fluctuations through time. So a little bit of basic biology for trees. They, of course, need, like most plants, light, water, nutrients, an intact, unobstructed vascular system. Just like us, we've got veins and arteries. They've got their own version of that. And they also need the correct soil conditions and the correct growing environment. You can't always take any tree from around the world and plant it where you're at and expect it to do well. There's a difference between surviving and thriving when it comes to your plants doing well. So choosing the right ones. And then, of course, it needs some sort of mechanism to be able to generate sugars. So either through leaves or other mechanisms to photosynthesize. One interesting version of that is the palo verde. It'll actually, if it's really drought stressed, it will lose all of its leaves in the summer, and then it can photosynthesize through its bark. That's why the bark is green. So it can actually conserve water by dropping all of its leaves, but still make sugars through its bark. And one very interesting thing, this is really, but one reason why I put this in here is because tree biology really dictates how we manage them. And this is where I see a big problem and a big difference between just tree trimmers and arborists when it comes to this, is that the most of the water that you give a tree just goes to basically generating this mechanism to pull water out of the ground and get it up super high into the canopy. If you had a straw that was 30 feet long, maybe let's say 50 feet long, and you tried to suck water up that straw, by about 30 feet, that water would start to boil because you'd have almost a perfect vacuum above it. It would go immediately to a vapor. It's like, well, how do trees grow to be 100 feet tall if that's just what happens when you try and get water through a straw? Well, they've had a perfect, unobstructed, pure water column since they germinated from a seed. So if you disrupt that, if the air bubbles get into their vascular system, if any sort of sediment of any kind gets in there, it'll immediately cause that runaway cycle of the water turning into a vapor. And that's when you start seeing dieback. That's why topping is so bad. That's why over trimming your trees are so bad, because you basically poked a bunch of holes in the tree and now it's just lost all that water pressure that it had. And that's all driven by the leaves. So the more leaves you have on your tree, I mean, that's really going to help get the water up into the tree's canopy. It's one reason why I see redwoods die so much around, especially in my area in Fresno, is that they get overtrimmed so bad. They're so tall, and now they have no leaves to actually pull water out of the ground and get it up and out. So yeah, 95% of the water that they absorb just evaporates through the leaves. And that is its primary function. Only a little bit of it goes to actually photosynthesizing and making sugars through the leaves, and 5% of that goes to actual growth. So water your trees for one. They need it to be able to actually keep their crown alive. Um, and it's really interesting. For every one carbon dioxide molecule that is absorbed through the leaves, it loses hundreds of molecules of water. Like, they need an exceptional amount of water just to be able to keep that system going. And that system's called transpiration, that mechanism of evaporating the water through the leaves, through those stomata, those little tiny pores on the leaves I had mentioned earlier. So, like I said, it directs management. And so improper pruning destroys the tree's ability to heal, combat disease, and transport water. That's why we cut the limbs at a particular angle, or why we don't top the limbs. That picture over there on the right-hand side there, that's a camphor tree that I've noticed in my area that got severely topped and had almost all of its crown removed. Now it's mostly just water sprouts, but you can see all the dead tips there. That's that water column that has collapsed through there up until a point to where it could actually plug up its vascular system. And so it just looks horrendous. And actually, that tree's a bigger hazard now. Improper pruning and everything like that can actually increase the risk of tree failure. Um, and so also, if it's not properly cut, wounds won't heal over properly, like that middle picture there. The tree will heal over those types of wounds eventually, but if it's not done properly, it can be delayed and that can rot. That can let insects in and disease in. And say if they don't do proper cutting sequence on larger limbs, like that bottom picture there, it can basically rip off huge parts of the tree and leave these big gaping wounds, which isn't also going to heal very well. Same issue with disease issues. And then, of course, the water sprout growth. A lot of times, water sprout growth is assumed to be vigorous, like, oh, look, I trimmed the tree and now I have all this new growth and it looks so dense and lush. Well, water sprouts have they have their use, but if it's in response to a stressor, then it's really not good. They're not as well attached. They're going to produce, say, sugars and everything, but they're not as deeply embedded into the tree. So they're not going to last as long. And they're also, they grow a lot faster. And so when they grow a lot faster, they're more prone to disease. And this is why I say if it's improperly pruned, your cost of management goes up because now you're going to have insect issues like aphids. I see that all the time on heavily pruned trees where it's mostly water sprouts. Then you're also going to have those fall off more. It's going to be a lot more foliage because the tree's like, where did my crown go? It's all gone. I need something. I'd just produce as much of it as possible. Plus, it takes a lot of energy, lots and lots of energy to produce and refill in all of that. So now it doesn't have any energy to say fight off disease, or I have a little bit of a weak area over here. Maybe I'll try and put some energy into packing on more wood so this limb might not break. So all of its stored energy and its roots just go straight to trying to fill back in the crown that it just lost. And so selecting a tree trimming service, I mean, like I said, it's hard to find an arborist. So a lot of times what I'd say is, of course, make sure that they're licensed, insured, and bonded, but just ask them, hey, do you know the ANSI 300 standards? And do you know about the best management practices from the International Society of Arboriculture? And tell them, like, I want my trees trimmed to those standards. Like anything beyond that, like I don't want it. And make sure that they follow it. And another thing too, this is another standard, no spiking trees. The climbing spurs that they put on their ankles to help get up the tree, that is not an industry standard. That is a big no-no. The only trees you're supposed to use those on are dead ones. It's basically kind of like using a used hypodermic needle on somebody in the medical field. You wouldn't want that. It's the same thing with this. You know, you're taking this spike, this needle essentially, and injecting it into a tree over and over again. And who knows if the last tree they climbed was actually diseased. And now they just put that disease into your tree. Or it's got a big open wound, and those go deep enough to actually get into the tree's vascular system. So a lot of times when I assess trees that aren't doing well, sometimes I see funguses sticking straight out of those old holes from the spike wounds. So make sure that they're actually climbing the trees properly using rope systems or using a bucket truck. And if you're not sure, I mean, just get a local arborist involved. Call them up and say, "Hi, I want you as a third party here," and to make sure that they prune this right because they don't have their own arborist, and I want to make sure that my assets are actually protected here. So, what should your trees not look like? I have a couple examples. It's actually not very hard for me to drive around Fresno and find these examples. So, there's a tree beforehand. It was already topped. It wasn't all that great. And then this is what it looked like after. There's nothing left. That's a very common thing I see, unfortunately. And there's a lot of problems that come with that. So it's topped, it's over trimmed. So what can happen? Of course, that excessive water sprouting, vulnerable disease and insect infestation, bark damage from the sun. The sun on usually tissue in the tree is very used to what it's growing in or what conditions it's under. So now all of a sudden, an area that was shaded is no longer shaded, isn't very going to be tolerant to like excessive heat and exposure to the sun, and that might cause the bark to die and peel off. It happens a lot with Japanese maples. And then the shape in general is just ruined. It's an increased hazard now too. I can get into the mechanics of that later. The health is going to be weakened. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of energy is going to be required to fill that poor crown back in. Increased mess and of course expected rot, especially at those big cut ends. Those wounds aren't going to heal properly. And then the water sprouts that grow on those ends are rotten and then they break off and then they can strike whatever's around it. And then I've got more examples. There's Chinese pistache before and then after. Yeah, generally you don't want to remove more than 25% of a tree's crown in a given year. Both of these, I put those between 90 and 100%. So way off the mark. Another one, Bradford pear, not my favorite tree in the world, but either way, it's somebody's tree. And then that's the after effect. That is not good. Again, ruined shape, topped, over thinned like crazy. That is not what you want your tree to look like when it's all done. Here's an interesting one that kind of gets mistaken for crown raising. Like if you go and you just raise the crown up, it's called lion tailing. I see this a lot too. It's where they remove all the internal lateral branches and just basically leave like this little puff ball at the very top of the branches, resembling a lion tail. And that one on the left, there's a pine tree that I just saw on the side of the road. I'm like, that's an excellent example. So you can see how those limbs that are coming off of the main trunk there, they're bowed. They look like a bow. And that's one problem with lion tailing is that it increases the risk of those limbs being broken. It's like putting a whole bunch of weight at one end of a lever, then you have the wind hit it. And that's an exceptional amount of stress on those tree limbs and they can break off. It looks like they did something, which they did, but mechanically, it is not the best thing. And same thing with the same issues. Foliar stress from exposures to more sunlight. And a lot of those lower internal branches are actually more important for allowing the limb or even the trunk to actually thicken. And that thickening is actually what helps make the limb more stable. So if those are constantly being removed, you're actually going to be removing the tree's main ability to actually pack on more wood to make that limb more stable over time. And then also, those lower internal limbs will actually get nutrients from photosynthesis to the root systems faster just because they're lower on the branch. So those are pretty important to keep. Let's see here. So what should they look like? Like I said, don't usually want to do more than 25% in a given year. Just enough to say, like looking at these two before left, you could hardly see any light coming through. You could hardly see any sky coming through the tree. And then you just want to have enough to where at least some sunlight can like penetrate into the crown, to get some more airflow, maintain the shape, just cut what's really necessary. And it's really not much. Um, Sometimes you think like, oh, they removed so much of the crown, I'm getting more bang for my buck, but in the long run, it's really not. Same thing with this one. This one was pretty overgrown, so yeah, removed a appropriate amount to where it's just not bald. You still have quite a lot on there to work with, and the tree can actually use. So as far as specs go, this is where like the ANSI 300 standards come in. They cover so many different things in arboriculture, but as far as pruning goes, this is kind of the basics of it. So really to me, we over trim our trees anyway. Like a lot of trees we don't need to trim every year, some not even every 5 years. Um, just because there's green on it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be trimmed. Um, and it's just kind of like a what is it, cumulative fatigue sort of thing. Like we just keep stressing these trees, especially if we're not fertilizing them or if we're not watering them enough. Over trimming can be pretty bad. But it should be directed as a percentage of the crown, the existing crown, not at its potential crown density, but what it has at that time. So it generally shouldn't be more than 25% for most or all trees within this setting. And for mature trees, it shouldn't really be more than 10%. Like if you got really big old trees, they have a different priority in life as far as what they're using their energy for. So if you remove too much of them, they're not going to fill in as much. It's going to stress them out even more. Their main thing is that they want to try and they've already got to their max size. They're happy. They just want to go and concentrate on fighting off disease. Just try and outlast the nature and environment around me. Leave me alone. Mostly just removing dead wood or anything that's hazardous. And same thing with larger limbs. So anything over 4 inches in diameter, if you have to remove any limb over 4 inches in diameter on a tree, that should just be the one thing that you do that year. It's going to be very stressful on the tree. And I've seen it before where, say, like a limb that was like 10 inches plus in diameter got removed, and the next year the tree died. And it was a perfectly fine tree before. It's just lost so much of its crown and so much of its water and food and everything. Like it just, yeah, it does not handle it very well. And the biggest misconception that I see is with crown reduction. This is where topping comes in. And that topping is just basically where you, instead of cutting a limb back to a good lateral branch, such as this picture down below, you want to cut back a branch to another branch that's going in a good direction, that's at least a third of the size of the one that you just cut. Uh, a topping cut would be you just come down and just cut that limb straight across, and it's just a stub. It just looks like just a fist, just nothing there above it at all. You want to cut it back to something that can retake over that dominant apex direction of growth. That's just how trees want to grow. But a lot of times too, for structure pruning, anything that's crossing, growing straight up, like the water sprouts, stump sprouts, of course, any dead wood, co-dominant. So in this figure over here on the right, you can see at the top where the tree's kind of forked. It's got two tops. I see this a lot on redwoods, and I've had to do many reports on for insurance where a codominant top broke off and smashed something. So making sure that you're getting rid of those codominant tops on trees because they can get included bark. They grow too close together, and then they grow together, and then they get rot, and one of them breaks off. So always making sure that you're getting rid of those when you see them early. And then just to avoid the lion tailing, put in here for the crown raising. It shouldn't really be more than, say, 8 feet for pedestrians on the pedestrian side. Buildings, clearance wise, it's 3 to 6 feet. So horizontal this way away from the building, at least 3 feet, and then vertically 6 feet. And then roadways, it depends on if it's an arterial roadway, a main roadway or not. But generally, it's going to be about between 15 and 20 feet of clearance. And you don't have to do that on the whole tree. I mean, you can kind of balance that out, but you don't have to have the whole tree raised up that much. Um, a lot of times they can just get kind of used to where they're growing and how they've been trimmed over the years, at least as far as, say, if they're kind of imbalanced like that, but don't overdo it on the imbalancing. So then some common terms, of course, we've heard of crown thinning, where you're just kind of removing branches within the crown itself, but not necessarily reducing its size, like for a crown reduction and crown raising. But then there's some more exotic things that we can do within arboriculture, such as crown restoration. So if a tree has been topped, you can select a new leader, and actually allow that leader to run out, hopefully heal over that big topped wound, and you might be able to get some form of the tree back. Crown cleaning, which is mostly just removing dead wood, and weight reduction. That's not always super necessary. Polearting. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. People always ask me, what do you think of polearting? Isn't that topping trees? Yeah, it is, but it is an accepted practice. But it's how you do it and when you do it. A lot of times I see it done on trees that are too old. You want to do it on young trees when they're very young, when new. You don't want to do it on an old tree and you're cutting things back that are like this big around. No, no. You once that tree's polearted, started early, and it has to be maintained as a poleard from the beginning. And polearding is when they cut it back. It looks like a topping cut. Then you get all those sprouts from one spot, cut those sprouts back to where it originated, and it turns into these big boxing mitt sort of look to them. Coppicing, espalier, pleaching, directional pruning. Uh, Espalier is pretty interesting. Don't really see it all that much. And coppicing is usually what you see with bushes, where you basically cut them flat with the ground and let the water sprouts run out. A lot of times I see that in the nurseries when they're trying to turn trees into bushes, but there's a big discussion going on whether or not they should keep doing that. And then, of course, palm trees. Can't not talk about palm trees. Palm trees are pretty nice. They grow everywhere in California, but gosh, are they just not pruned correctly at all. I usually see them cut back to like two or three fronds just sticking up out of the top, and it's like, oh gosh, no, please don't. They're they use the lower limbs that aren't dead yet as like nutrient reserves. So you basically took away all the tree's nutrient reserves that it had, and it again stresses them out. They don't have any way of um, getting that back until they grow it out. So a lot of times just removing the dead fronds, and don't go above horizontal with the crown. You don't want to go all the way up to where it's like this, just nice 180-degree if you cut that crown in half there. And definitely no spiking on palms. Those spurs that I was mentioning earlier, those spikes, these are actually more, but palms are more related to grass than they are actual trees. They don't have a living cambium layer, or the layer that actually allows cell division and lets, like, say, trees get wider. Um, so it never heals. Those wounds never heal. And it's very sensitive to decay. And I've seen these things snap in half because of the rot that's occurred because of consistent spiking. Or sprinklers. That's another one. You have sprinklers that are shooting out a pretty strong stream, and it hits that side of the tree. It'll tear the bark off, and it'll cause the same issue. That and cats also get called like, why is my palm all damaged? I'm like, do you have a cat or a herd of them in the area? Because they'll claw up your palms too. But yes, that's the basic thing with palms. Other than that, they usually do pretty well. and they at least have palm fertilizer all ready to go too. So fertilize your palms as well. So I wanted to throw this in here. Either if you're ever buying a tree from a nursery, or if you've hired somebody to plant some trees, make sure that you're getting good quality trees. There are some really bad quality stuff out there, and it's like it's already expensive enough to plant trees. It can cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars sometimes to plant trees. And if they're not good specimens, they're not going to last. And a lot of times they don't have a warranty on these things. So making sure that you see the root flare. So trees, they get wider at the base. They flare out. So they come down and then they flare out. You should see that. If it just looks like a telephone pole sticking out of the ground, that's not good because now you have tissue that's supposed to be above ground that's now below ground and it rots. And then the tree dies. That's what that picture is in the bottom left-hand side there is. Tree buried too deep, either in the pot or when it was planted, and it rots out and it kills the tree. Super preventable. I see it all the time, and it just needs to stop. Like, it's such an easily correctable thing, even down to like you get a tree in a pot, and it's already got the root flare exposed, and then someone buries it like 6 inches too deep. I think the deepest I've seen a tree planted too deep was like 14 inches. Then the other thing is trees that are root balled. They've got like a girdling roots. They've been in the pot for so long that all those roots just go around and around and around in a circle, and they just choke themselves out. Then you put it in the ground, the roots don't have anywhere to go because they're all balled up on each other like a ball of spaghetti. And then they expand, and then they basically choke themselves out, and it completely impairs the tree from being able to get nutrients up into the crown, and the tree dies or it falls over. I see that a lot too, because those roots aren't acting as roots. They're not acting as anchors. They're all in one spot. They just, a good strong gust of wind comes and just knocks the whole thing over 5 years later after you planted it. Um, and then the other thing is just the quality of the pruning or the quality of the shaping at the nursery or whoever you hired to trim your trees. There's a particular structure you're looking for. A lot of times, what I see is just it looks like a bare stick with maybe like a few things coming out, maybe all from one section, like in the poor quality one, the fourth one over, where you see everything originating from one location. That's not good in the long run. That's going to cause your tree to fall apart many years down the line. So really what you want to find are trees that have a really good upright shape, but they have a lot of lateral branching coming from a main stem in all directions. Not because I see them sometimes, they're trimmed to where it almost looks like a two-dimensional plane. Like they're three-dimensional things. They're supposed to have branches in all directions. No, they only have them going in this way and that way, and that's it. All the way around and low. Make sure that there are some branches that are lower on the trunk. Like I mentioned earlier, with the lion tailing, those lower branches, especially on young trees, is what's going to really help make that trunk widen out. And you need that trunk to widen out so it can actually be stable and help get the tree nutrients faster down to the root zone to allow it to grow quickly. So make sure that it actually has a good structure to it. Lots of branching top to bottom. And then also, once you get your tree and you like your tree, please put it in a good spot. This is a picture I took because I needed to go do an assessment at an HOA, and it was a newly built place. So this was a landscape architect idea, but all the trees every single house had maybe about 10 to 12 foot of clearance between them, and they put gigantic rounded shaped trees right in between each of them, right on top of the utility lines. So these trees are growing right on top of the water and the electric and the sewer lines. So I was like, well, that's not good in the long run. Plus, there's just not enough room. I mean, that tree's already been there for maybe 5 years, but it's has no room. It's gonna, the wind blows and it's gonna scratch up your siding. It's gonna maybe punch a hole through your window eventually once it gets big enough, destroy your eaves, all of it. It's that one was interesting. And they told me, well, what's the solution? I'm like, remove all the trees and plant ones, better ones or none at all, put them in a different spot. That's unfortunate. And then also not putting big trees, big mature trees underneath power lines. I'm sure everybody's had their interaction with PG&E or SoCal Edison come out and do this to their trees. And best way to prevent that is to just not put the large mature trees within the right of way of the power lines. Because this tree in particular, it's in my neighborhood. It's already so rotten on the ends, but deformed crown and everything. Then it's not always the crown you have to worry about. It's the space that the tree has to grow in, like that one on the right. Yeah, it started to destroy the infrastructure, so they came in and cut all the roots. I see that a lot. And that tree I would probably recommend removing at that point, which is a shame. So making sure that the tree that you're selecting and where you're putting it has enough room. If you go to selecttree.com, they actually have you can type in any tree that you want. You can look up all this information about it, but it has a root damage potential. And it'll tell you if it's low, medium, or high risk. And so high risk trees could be like your Chinese tallows. I've seen those things bust up foundations 40 feet away. Those trees, make sure you put them far away from any infrastructure. Other trees like Chinese pistachios, they're generally rated as low. There's a lot of factors that can affect that, but that can help you know what might be appropriate for a particular size. But this tree is just not it's not enough room in maturity. It's one of those things where I say we inherit the problems of the people before us when it comes to tree care, because somebody planted that and now we get to deal with it 50 years later. And then some other ones about planting. That's my favorite one is on the left. Gosh, yeah, that's a crepe myrtle. If it dies, which I think it already was, I don't know how they're gonna get that out and plant a new one. I don't even know what the point of that was, but making sure that your tree has enough room. I mean, this is what's called an impermeable surface. One things that trees need, especially their roots, is water, nutrients, and oxygen. And impermeable surfaces such as concrete don't allow any of that through. So I don't know what they're going to do about that one. They're going to have to bust out that concrete, at least in that tan section. Um, but yeah, brilliant design. And then there's the center one. That's an example of a tree being buried too deep again. Like I said, it looks like a telephone pole sticking out of the ground. Also, this is another good example for this one. That darker colored brown in the back, right up against this light one, that's the nursery stake. Remove your nursery stakes when you stake your trees. That can actually increase your mortality rate of your trees by 30%. So the way that you want to have your tree supported is with two stakes outside of the root ball and have those the bands to support it within the upper third or lower third of your crown of the tree. Remove the nursery stake. Do not leave it in. It will kill your tree or severely deform it, stunt it, damage it. Just remove it. It's not supposed to be there. And then one that I don't see as much is trees being buried too high every here and there, but that can really increase the likelihood of the tree falling over. It's just not going to establish any good buttressing roots that are like right there up against the base of the trunk. And it can be pretty destabilized and sun damage to the root system. And that one I don't see as common as strings being buried too deep. So let's see here. So some other things that can kill your trees that I see a lot of. That's another good one. Wrapping the tree in plastic in any way, shape, or form. That'll kill your tree. Seen that around the trunk, and it just turns the trunk into sludge from all the bacterial activity. Cutting roots, weed barriers. Weed barriers are bad, especially black plastic. That is just going to completely sterilize your soil, kill everything in it, raise the temperature, no moisture, anything can get in that. Don't use black plastic. Even the weed barriers that you can get at Home Depot, those aren't even all that good. Uh, they say like it allows water in, but it still doesn't really do that all that well. And then the support ties, like the one in the middle. that can actually go and say, if you leave those support ties on too long when you've got your tree planted, the tree will grow around it. That can girdle the tree and kill it, basically strangles it out. And if it doesn't, that will always be in there and it causes rot, and the tree can actually snap in half from that point too. I've seen that before where trees snap in half, and I go and observe them, and I'm like, oh, well, look at this. There's a nursery stake still inside the wood, and that's where it snapped off at. And then another one is volcano mulching. These are like the main ones. So you put mulch down, but you basically mound it up right up against the trunk. That's the same thing as burying your tree too deep. It'll rot them, cause roots to just circle around the tree and kill it. So make sure that that mulch is spread out, no more than 4 inches thick, all around the root zone. I mean, preferably out to the edge of the canopy. I know it's not realistic, but in a lot of instances, but just don't have it up against the side of the trunk at all. Um, and then here's all the other ways you can kill your tree. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are just all the things that can happen that can really impact your tree's health. From overwatering, over trimming, pouring gasoline or oil within the root zone, running over the root zone, with like heavy machinery, raising or lowering the grade, applying herbicides to the roots. Um, there's a lot. Leaving the ties on and planting too high, too deep. Oh, there's so many different things that can happen that can kill your tree. Not outright, but it can take years sometimes. So that's where this comes in. How do they die? It's a gradual effect. A lot of times it starts with a predisposed issue such as environment, such as drought and exposed heat. So trees will eventually start getting stressed out when they don't have enough water. It's the primary thing. They can no longer really support making the chemicals that they need to fight off disease. And then we come along and we overwater. We cut all the roots to put in our sidewalks or put in a pool or anything like that. And maybe we go and trim it really bad and it stresses it out more. And that's when you start seeing diseases. That's when you start seeing insects because they only really attack trees that are already sick. Trees actually have a really good immune system. And so if they're just like us, if we start getting a little too weak, we're not taking care of ourselves, we start getting sick more often. Same thing with trees. And it's really hard to bring them back. Once you start seeing a fungus sticking out of that tree, getting rid of that is probably not possible. There are a lot of different fungicides and products that can help suppress the growth of a fungus in a tree, but eradication, probably not going to be, and you might get more years out of the tree, but not as much as if it was properly managed before. Very hard to treat once there's an issue. Insects is easy. Systemic insecticide, you can knock out the bugs pretty easy, but the underlying issue is the tree needs the proper support and care so that it's healthy enough to fight off these issues. So fertilizer, proper irrigation, proper trimming, all those sorts of things. I get, especially for HOAs, I get this asked a lot. I'm actually in the middle of doing like a 400 tree risk inventory right now, letting them know what it is about their trees that are risky. Trees do have a risk, just like with anything else. You're actually more likely to probably get in a car accident and be harmed than actually have a tree impact you or something that you like so substantially that it's like detrimental. Um, I mean, I'm sure we all know somebody that's maybe one person here in our life that has had some sort of negative interaction with the tree, but probably all of us and know somebody or maybe ourselves have been involved in a car accident. Much more, much more likely. Mine's a little bit more than probably everybody else, but before I was an arborist, I was a paramedic, so I actually got called out to car accidents all the time. So my exposure to that is a lot more. So to me, I never got any calls about tree related stuff, mostly car accidents and everything else. Um, so there is a particular method that is used for tree risk. This is why the insurance companies, I'm like, you're not using arborists to look at these trees and consider them a risk. Just give them a little pushback. Get an arborist to actually write a report about the tree, and they'll probably back off. Um, because it is a legal document, and so that probably wouldn't stand up in court. Who knows? But risk comes down to your own risk tolerance as a property manager, though. Like I could tell you, this tree has a couple areas that are risky. I don't think they're really all that bad, but at the end of the day, I'm just here to advise you on my professional opinion. If you don't feel comfortable with a particular tree, you can absolutely mitigate that by getting rid of the risk, whether that's removing a particular limb or by removing the tree. Um, I can just provide you the information to tell you whether the risk is low, medium, or high, or extreme. And well, if it's extreme, I just tell you to remove it anyway. But we go out and we look for specific kinds of defects. I mean, a lot of them are going to be, say, like topping. Like, yes, you need to manage those water sprouts. Those can break off very easily and strike different things. Of course, the easiest ones are looking for signs of fungus. It really indicates internal rot and termites, things like that. Um, and sometimes, the risk is always going to be there. I've had people ask me, I want to plant a tree that has no risk. And I say, well, then you can't have a tree. Everything has a risk. Um, it's just how we deal and maintain those risks over the years. But there's something that there's called sudden branch drop or SBD. They don't really understand why it happens, but particular species will just spontaneously drop limbs for no reason in the summer. They could have no defects or any obvious problems. They will just drop limbs. Some of those will be Chinese pistache, Chinese elms, eucalyptuses, ash, liquid ambers, pines, oaks. They they think it's because during the summer months, they have a drop in water pressure inside of their limbs because they're getting water stressed, and that makes the wood brittle, and that causes the limb to spontaneously break. So, management of that is usually just making sure that you're irrigating them enough, and then also managing a little bit of the weight on the those particular limbs that could potentially strike something. Um, and then the fungus down in the bottom right-hand corner, this is one that you should all be aware of and one that you should always look out for. It's called artist conch or Ganoderma. So actually, they call it artist conch because if you take that fungus and you flip it over, it's got a white bottom, and you took something sharp, like say this is people will take needles and they'll draw on the bottom because it turns brown. It goes from white to brown if it's scored with something sharp. And so people will make fine art out of it. You can Google it. It's actually pretty cool what people will make out of it. But that is a very, very aggressive root rot fungus. Brown top, white bottom, scratch the bottom and it turns brown, remove the tree. I don't care. Like you see that on that tree, remove it. I've seen more trees fall over because of that fungus than anything else, especially Bradford pears. It really goes after Bradford pears pretty bad. I've seen it on mulberries a lot, eucalyptuses, Chinese pistaches every here and there. Um, yeah, it's very common. A lot of fruit trees get it too. Most things in the rose family will get it, like your pears and cherries and all that. California pepper trees will get it for sure. But that one is, I just keep an eye out for it always when I do tree risk assessments. And if I see it, I know that that fungus has been in the tree doing damage for at least 5 years. It completely disintegrates, for lack of better terms, the wood on the inside of the tree, and the tree just uproots and falls over, sometimes without even a hard storm coming through. So, yeah, Ganoderma, keep an eye out for that one. And then this was asked me to talk about the new California law, the AB 1572. So basically, if you have an area with non-functional turf that's being irrigated by potable water, it'll no longer be allowed to be irrigated by potable water. It has to be like maybe recycled water or some sort of non-potable water. Very expensive issue for a lot of HOAs and property owners, because you have to redo your whole irrigation system and find out where to get non-potable water. Um, but there is an exception, and this is the thing. So I read through the bill, and I went through all the different support websites talking about this bill. But from my perspective, they said one they said that one thing that you could do to as an exemption is that if there's trees on the grass, the non-functional turf, if you put trees on it, then I guess it becomes functional in some way. But they didn't give any specs. I'm like, is it one tree every 1,000 feet, or is it one tree every 5 feet? So I had actually called up the state, and they never called me back. I called back one other area or one other group that's affiliated with it, and I asked them, and they didn't know because I said like, okay, well, you plant a tree, Does if there's 50 feet away, like in the grass in between, is that fine? Like, I need more information here. So I'm working on trying to get an answer. I'm hopefully going to get a call back from the state on that soon, and I'll find some way to get that information to you. But my recommendation is just plant more trees. I feel like if the projected canopy cover will cover the area, that's fine. And for most trees, that might be 40 to 50 foot spacing by maturity. Their crowns would be big enough if they had a rounded shape to them, might be good enough. So yeah, there wasn't enough detail in there for me on the tree side. And they when I called them, they seemed kind of surprised that somebody asked such a specific question they didn't know. So I'll get back to you on that. But we've got some time. 2029 is when HOAs must comply with the law. So that's about 3 years, a little less than 3 years for me to get an answer on that and get that to y'all. So yeah. But yeah, my name's Ian. I'm with Elite Maintenance and Tree Service, and I'm the regional arborist with them. So if you got any questions, I'll go through here and see what I can answer for y'all.
Yeah, let me go ahead and finish this off for you. We're going to go into the Q&A session. And as we go in there, I want to say thank you to Reliable Pavement Services and CID Consortium LLC, both for sponsoring the session today. Please remember to place your questions in uh, the Q&A feature. We do use the upvote. So in the feature, you'll see an upvote sign. It's a thumbs up, and vote for your favorite questions. We'll start with the questions with the most votes first, and I'll go ahead and help with the moderate these questions as we go along. So thank you so much. Let me pull up the questions now. Okay, Q&A. And Ian, you might want to follow along in the Q&A feature, and there's a little downward caret where it says most recent, and then click on that and it'll be most upvotes.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Most upvotes of the time.
So John Rickard asked a question. John's a regular with us, and he asked a question and has five upvotes for it. What are the pros and cons of different root barrier systems for lateral roots, especially redwoods?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different kinds of root barriers. The thing about them, though, is say if you just get your standard thickness for the plastic ones, they only last about 5 to 7 years in general. The thicker stuff that's a little bit more expensive can last up to 15 years. And then there's also a fabric kind that actually has like an herbicide in it. So it like slow releases an herbicide. So if the root touches it, that root tip dies. Um, but the root barriers are good to put in before the tree starts actually getting large. A lot of times, what I see is people start to put them in once the tree is established, and that requires a lot of cutting of roots. And a lot of times, that's done with a trencher, and that just cuts all the roots instead of selecting particular ones to keep or remove. And redwoods, I mean, they have a very expansive, very expansive, long-reaching, um, what is it, root system that's relatively shallow. That being said, they're also kind of low risk as far as like infrastructure damage. I think one of the main problems with them is that they actually absorb too much water out of the soil and causes the soil to shrink. Then the water gets wet again and expands, and then that can also crack your sidewalk or your concrete. So it's very variable, but there is a method to measuring out. Say you take the trunk diameter and then say it's a 15-inch tree. That means 15 feet out from that tree generally is going to be like your critical root zone where you should have very minimal impacts. And you can take a percentage out of these different layers within that space. But if it's going to be generally for about 3 to 5 feet, if you're 3 to 5 feet from that trunk and you have to cut roots, especially a lot of them to get that root barrier in, just remove the tree. That's where you're going to have most of your big anchoring roots in the ground. And if you cut those, that tree could fall over, especially redwoods. Again, shallow root system, they need as much roots as they can to kind of stay in the ground. So the closer you have to cut to that trunk, the more dangerous it is. And it could also just outright kill them because now it's just lost a huge amount of its root system as well. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Could you explain just what that barrier is used for? Because I think a lot of us don't know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so a root barrier is generally most of the time, it's going to be a plastic sheet, like a thick plastic sheet that's usually about 18 to 24 inches in height. And so what they do is they'll go from soil grade, cut down about 18 to 24 inches, and then put that piece of plastic into that little trench they made. So when the roots try and go in that direction, they hit it and then they'll grow down or away. And that helps keep the roots from, say, getting underneath sidewalks, for example, and potentially damaging the sidewalks.
Mhm. So an HOA would, yeah, for like a pool or a foundation, you might consider that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to the next one, and I have to refresh here real quick in that little refresh circle. And we have a lot of questions, so we're going to need to go pretty quickly. We have eight upvotes on this one. We've seen instances of tree roots affecting plumbing, toilets, and sewer pipes. Are there maintenance or planning for that the HOA should do to protect against that?
Oh yeah, I get called out a lot for this. It really depends on the tree. But most trees, if they're one thing that trees will do is they'll actually let you know where your leaks are because their roots will find a water source, and once they find that water source, oh, they'll just go for it and they'll just keep growing in that direction because they say, oh yeah, that's where I want to spend all my energy is right where that resource is. So a lot of times what I see is the older type of sewer lines or plumbing lines that's like ceramic where it's actually got like this coupling that like fits into itself and then there's kind of like this little space. Maybe there was like a rubber gasket there at one point, but that rubber eventually degrades and then the roots get into there, or like ceramic tiling, like eventually they'll actually get through the ceramic sometimes. It degrades and then they'll just find it. But that's where it really comes down to making sure that you know where your lines are, even electrical lines, and then like your main water lines, and just make sure you don't plant anything within 6 feet of that line. That's the general industry standard is you want 6 feet of space away from any sort of infrastructure, especially anything subsurface. And usually at that point, the root system will probably not impact that. But a lot of times it's because I see it where the tree is planted right on top of it or too close to it. As the tree expands, everything under the ground expands with it. It shifts soil and it'll put a lot of pressure down or up on the pipes and bend them or pop them. So,
Okay.
yeah, just
So Ian, I think the question is, what can they do if they have the trees there? And I presume what preventive, I mean, obviously you can use a pig to clear out your sewer lines. That's one thing. A pig is a little like a little bullet that goes through the sewage line and it cuts the roots off. That's a temporary solution. I think the barrier was another solution that you can do to maintain it.
mhm.
Ultimately, it's going to be probably about the type of tree and how close it is and the aggressiveness of that tree that you're going to need to be keeping an eye on. This is
Yeah,
something we see a lot in our developments now because they're 30 plus years old.
yeah. And if the main one that's the easiest one to kind of mitigate too is say if you have a septic system, they do have over-the-counter chemicals that you can put into the tank that'll actually kill roots that could be getting into the leach lines. That's another one where I see is like the trees are just getting into the leach lines. So
Mhm.
yeah, putting those in there is also good. But as far as say putting that down your toilet, probably not the best idea. A lot of times is like it's not a problem until it's a problem. It's a lot of times you just don't know. And if it's far enough away, I mean, you can remove some soil down to where the line is very carefully. I'd probably say hire a professional to do that and just see what's there. And if there isn't any roots going in that direction, but you're really worried about it, just yeah, you can put some sort of root barrier in the way. But if it's modern stuff like PVC, um, that stuff usually is okay. I
Mhm.
hardly see damage with that stuff.
Okay. Well, it seems like a preventative might be to the chemical treatment is that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, or having landscape architects make sure that they don't plant trees right on top of the lines.
That that unfortunately is the ship has sailed on that one once you have the tree planting.
Yeah.
And it's 30 years old, right? Okay, I hope that's helpful to you. Let's see. Next question is from Miss Anonymous. And are there ideal times of the year to trim trees? Does it vary by tree type or species? How does the arborist need to address active bird nests?
Yeah, good question. I mean, unfortunately, since there's 73,000 different trees and everybody lives in a different hardiness zone and everything and different ages, all that, I have to speak very generally. But generally, pruning in late winter to early spring is the best time to trim trees. There are some exceptions to that, such as like with southern magnolias, they actually prefer being pruned in the summer, especially when they've stopped producing so much sap. Late winter is usually pretty good too, especially for oak trees, mostly just because that at that time the tree will be able to kind of heal itself a little bit better. There's going to be less sap, and that means that it's not going to be an active borer time. If you trim oak trees during the spring, late winter, or not late winter, in the summertime, and you have those big wounds on there, that's going to attract borers and insects to that sap, and then you've got that issue. Um, and then so for the active bird nest part, a lot of that's up to the local ordinances of where you live. Some cities have really good ordinances about making sure that you're not impacting bird nests. In general, I would really hope that tree trimmers would do their due diligence to make sure they're not disrupting any sort of habitat like that or sensitive um, birds, because it would be a crime if you did. It really just comes down to I guess an honesty thing at that point. But always just kind of figure out what your local ordinance is when it comes to that. And, you can always call out a biologist if you think that you might have an active bird nest and just identify what the bird is and know when they're roosting and not roosting and they've left the nest, and then it'd be fine to go in and trim it when they've left the nest.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm gonna add my 2 cents in here since I come from a farming background. The seasonality of pruning is incredibly important for the health of the for most species of trees,
Mhm.
and most species of plants for that matter. And I think a lot of times we see landscapers who would like to fit it into their schedule. And I know this has happened, I've seen this happen personally, where it's easier for them to have a crew out in the summer and they have an expanded crew because of all the maintenance. And then in I also go in and start pruning the trees throughout the summer, and that's usually the worst time to prune a tree. Yeah, you don't want to do it when the water is difficult and the sun is really coming down. And I mean, you can add your 2 cents there, but that's my perspective on it. Is
Mhm.
be careful, work closely with your landscaper, and make sure that you know what you're doing. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we have so many people here today that can do this, but talk to the landscaper and make sure that they understand that we don't work on their schedule necessarily. We need to make sure that the trees are going to be healthy. And unfortunately, I think I've seen it, and I think Ian, you and I and Leela were sitting in a coffee shop when we talked about this, and we just looked out the window and people had gone out and just butchered the trees. These are commercial, and you knew the trees weren't going to do well. And so, be careful and remember, a lot of what has to do with trees when you prune them, and if you don't do it right, you're creating a weakness in the plant, and then that weakness opens itself up to a lot of really bad things that'll eventually kill the tree, like pests and borer beetles and other things.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Let's go to the next one then here. Are there ideal time? Okay, hold on, Connor. Okay, we got it. From Carol. Hi, Carol. We have issues with roots from our trees traveling into the neighboring property and causing damage to lawns and potentially to sidewalks. What would be the proper procedure to take care of this?
I'd say if it all depends on distance, again, kind of like how I mentioned before with that critical root zone. If they're far enough away from the main trunk, I mean, getting rid of those roots wouldn't be the biggest issue if it wasn't like a huge swath. Damage to the lawn, I'm more of like, well, that's where trees are gonna have their roots is in the ground. It's just going to be kind of part of the landscape at that point. I'd almost say leave it. The only problem with that is they're probably going to run over it with a lawnmower over and over again. So eventually they might actually shave it down enough with the lawnmower till it's level with the grade of the soil, and then it shouldn't be much of a problem. But then for the sidewalks, oh yeah, I get called out a lot for conflicts between neighbors on whose tree is causing what damage to what. And my insurance, I need an insurance claim report and all that kind of stuff. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of times, the only way that you can really determine if it's damage from a tree is usually if there's lifting. Trees usually will lift sidewalks. If there's cracks, like little fine cracks on there, but there's no lifting, I would normally say that that might just be from other things. Concrete itself just wants to crack. It can crack naturally at any point for any given reason. It could be down to maybe when they put in that portion of the sidewalk that was just too thin and shrinking and swelling of soils, or maybe something heavy drove over it and caused a crack or something like that. And it got worse. If it freezes in your area, water gets in there and freezes. There's so many other things that can cause concrete to crack, but a lot of it has to do with the tree species and the distance from that tree that would really make me determine, is this a possibility that it is? Um, and yeah, the only real true way to tell if it is directly caused by, say, a large root is to just dig down there and find out, or really shell out some money if you don't want to tear up the grass and use ground penetrating radar. But a lot of it is going to be speculative, based off of tree habit and distance, and whether or not there is that shifting of the concrete up or down. So.
So you have quite an asset there in a tree, and you have these runners running along, and obviously most people want the tree for aesthetic reasons, but you valued these trees as well. What are their valuations? How far, what's sort of the range of the valuation of a tree?
How do you mean, like monetarily, like
Yeah,
monetary
right.
value?
The monetary
Oh,
value.
yeah, that's a whole process in of itself. I think the most expensive tree that I've appraised was about $90,000. It was like a 74-inch diameter redwood in the middle of San Jose, um, in the city, which was very interesting. It was going to be $220,000, but there's a process of looking at its function, whether or not that it's growing in a good location, if it's providing some sort of function, and if it has any other issues like dieback disease, um, if it doesn't look like it's going to last that much longer, that sort of stuff that can depreciate the value based off of percentage. So there was a pretty big deduction on the value. But one thing that I get involved with and have been involved with is like, one interesting one was some teenagers. These bored kids came onto someone's property and took hammers to the people's trees and completely removed all the bark, completely girdled like 8 sweet gum trees, and they needed a evaluation of the value of the trees, and it came out to like $30,000 in damage. Um, and I don't know how that resolved, but yeah, it's
So
usually
we're not,
based off. That's that.
so we're really talking about quite a bit of money. We're anywhere from, maybe 5,000 to $90,000 for a tree. And I think a lot of the times we undervalue the value, our trees. I know my little community of 54, I think we have 130 trees or something like that on it. At $5,000 a piece, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, well, say if you had an ag background, say someone drives off the road into your field and smashes 5 of your trees. Well, those had a value, a potential value. So whatever you were selling them for, I mean, you'd take the value of whatever product you had based off of X amount of years that you would probably get that out of there. And there's the value of the tree in that situation because its
Mhm.
function is to produce, other than say privacy or shade or slope stabilization, things like
Yeah,
that.
I think a lot of the issues in many of the communities I work with have an issue of the view, sort of like their viewscape. And some of the people want to cut the trees because they're cute and pretty when they're 5 years old, but when they're 30 years old, they grow up and block the view of the community or the vista, if you will. And so then they want to cut them down. and you have a controversy there between what was a small, nice view, and you bought the house because you like the views, and now you have a $90,000 asset in front of you that that the rest of the community wants to keep. So this creates a lot of issues. So anyhow, having an expert, we're taught that having an expert between us is always a good thing. That's called the business judgment rule. Rely on your experts, make sure you bring people in that can do that. And I know in my community we had that issue, and we did bring in three experts, and they all said, don't cut the tree down. We ended up cutting the tree down. Richard Vasquez asked a really good question here, and I really wanted to get to this. It's about fire resiliencies and the type of, how to provide trees can help us with fire resiliency. If you could touch on that, I know that's a big issue, especially along the coast. And we have this urban wildfire interface now that we're talking about, and there's a lot of trees. They're asking us to remove turf, a non-functional turf, which is, arguably could be a way to help reduce the fire risk. Now you have these big trees. What do you do about that? How do you take care of them to help reduce fire risk?
Sure. All right. We got a fire question. I actually used to be a wildland firefighter on a hotshot crew at one point and worked in with the state doing wildfire mitigation, especially after the Creek Fire in the Sierra National Forest. So I spent a lot of time looking at landscapes as far as, say, how wildfire will be affected, and actually got to see how wildfire plays a role. A lot of it has to do with your ladder fuels. So, making if you're wanting to preserve your trees within a fire, I mean, distance is everything between them, and that has a lot to do with the slope. So the steeper the slope, the longer those flame lengths can be, and the easier it can be for them to say go from ground to tree or from tree to tree to tree. So say when it comes to fire resilience, it really comes down to your neighborhood. I mean, you can have the most immaculate, perfect, CAL FIRE happy looking property, but if your neighbors don't have that, I mean, if you get a big ripping and roaring fire upslope with winds, I mean, it can run so quickly. You can have 300-foot flame lengths, and it's like that 15 foot of vertical clearance that you just put in. I mean, that's a little excessive on your trees up. I mean, that's not going to matter. You could just have a running canopy fire just because your collective community didn't maintain their trees well and had enough space between trees, didn't remove the ladder fuels or the fuels growing underneath the trees, like bushes or like low-hanging limbs and everything like that. And of course, species plays a part. I mean, eucalyptus is terrible in the wildland fire interface because it's they're just so volatile. It's just what they do. But even our native species like manzanitas, I've seen manzanitas, man, when those things they catch on fire, all those leaves just turn into little tiny embers that just break off and just scatter about. Um, so, I mean, a lot of our native species are pretty resistant to fire because of how thick their bark is. And so it really just comes down to making sure that you don't have anything too close to your house, especially larger trees, because even I've seen trees catch fire at the very tippy top because one ember just happened to get in there and maybe find a nice little pile of built up needles up in there. It's usually pine trees that I see that do that. Um, and then just understanding your slope, like how much grade you have coming up. Like, are you down in a bowl? Or are you sitting up on top of a hill or anything like that? And then just the spacing between them. You might have to knock out a couple trees to get enough spacing. But look in your area for Firewise communities. Firewise communities, I helped get a lot of Firewise communities started in our areas. There's also resource conservation districts. I worked for a resource conservation district where we used grant funding to help people get free fire risk evaluations and help them manage their land as well. Um, and those are becoming a lot more utilized. Uh, so look into Firewise communities, and I think it's through the NFPA, and then look for your local resource conservation district and see if they have any of those resources. Because I know most people don't want to call CAL FIRE, like, "Hey, can you come look at my my fire risk here?" And they're like, Cool. Here's your one of three warnings to get this done. Thanks for calling me out and putting me on your radar. So yeah, look into those resources.
Okay, sorry. What I guess we're doing here is just to summarize the fire stuff is that, make sure that you have the right trees planted, make sure that they're spaced properly, and maintained well. Trees that aren't maintained well create more fire hazards because it can catch on fire pretty easily. Also, it creates duff on the bottom below the tree, branches and twigs fall, and that's flammable as well. So there's some things that you can do to protect yourself. And I think Fire Safe, FireWise, those type of programs are really good that can help you. We did go a little long here, and I'm gonna go ahead and finish off my the closure here. Ian, do you have time to we have a lot of questions still. And
Yeah,
do you have a couple minutes after this, or do you need to get zipping out?
sure.
Okay, so let's go ahead and close this up. Again, thanks so much, Ian, for coming today. We do appreciate it. And I want to thank all of you who are Echo members for coming. And those of you that aren't Echo members, we'd love it if you would become an Echo member. That's how we pay for these things. That's how we keep the doors open at Echo is through our association community memberships and our private homeowner memberships. So please do become a member so we can continue to do this. For those of you who would like to join, you just need to go to our website at www.echo-ca.org and click on the membership tab. And it's a very simple process. We'd love to have you be members. Echo members, again, thank you for supporting us. And please invite your friends, boards, and especially management firms and vendors to join Echo. A simple invitation is often all it takes to encourage someone to join. And one thing I want to say is that Echo is the only association out there that is focused on helping communities. We represent the interests of HOA boards and HOA homeowners exclusively. And so we're there for you. If you would like to become more involved with Echo, please consider joining our volunteer corps. It's really a lot of fun. As part of our volunteers, you have the opportunity to do many things with us. And you can take a look at the slide. There's several things there. I'm actively looking for people that can help with writing articles and other things. We do have our board elections coming up pretty soon. And if you want to we're open for collecting candidates for the board as well. And now for our other announcements, the Echo HOA University has an educational program that's focused on board preparedness. The core curriculum of 10 courses is designed for a high quality learning experience and is available to all board members for board training, but to anyone else who's interested in learning about it, including professionals and interested homeowners. Is a good way to get homeowners involved and have them get over that hump of knowledge that they can help run the association. It gives them an opportunity to know what they need to do. Your participation in this program will earn you, that is the certification program, will earn you a certificate of HOA board member preparedness. The courses are offered live online and most are recorded and available on demand. So no excuse not to take the courses from a time perspective. If you or someone you wants to enroll in certification program, registration is available online. And if you need assistance, email Connor at his address on the screen. Here are our small meetings, the resource panels, which are coming up in the second quarter. In Sacramento, we have the Sacramento Resource Panel. It's held in Roseville on Tuesday the 7th. And we're going to be talking about non-functional turf, water conservation, and non-functional turf. That should be a good one. We have someone from an agency coming that's going to talk about funding to help you make that transition. The Echo Club at Rossmore, TCAR, is April 8th. Again, that's non-functional turf, and East Bay East Bay Mud is going to be there. So we're excited about that. East Bay Resource Panel is in San Ramon. And that one is going to be about HOA tree care. So there you go. We're going to have a tree care person there in person. Wine Country Resource Panel is Tuesday, April 21. Shape, Strengthen, and Sustain, your guide to pruning and plant well-being. So again, this is a landscaping meeting. The Wine Country is Santa Rosa, so it'll be there in Santa Rosa. North Bay Resource Panel in Novato is Wednesday, April 22nd, and that's sewer and systems maintenance, and that's sewer system maintenance. So that's a good one. We do get those calls. Those are the nastiest calls we get. They always are problematic. San Francisco Resource Panel is on Wednesday, April 22nd. It's an evening event, and it's going to be April showers lead to water intrusion. Water intrusion, as you know, is the number one reason most insurance claims are filed. We have three larger in-person events planned for this year with multiple speakers and many professional exhibitors. Save the date for 2026. It's important to do this and get your reservations quickly. In Northern California, we have the Northern California Educational Seminar on June 13th. It's a Saturday event from 9:30 to 3. And we're going to be talking, I've got a couple people lined up now for that. It's called Nuts and Bolts and the Future of HOAs. And we have someone from Heritage Bank is going to talk about funding projects, especially many of the projects that are unforeseen. And we have someone who's going to do how to manage costs, a project manager that's going to be doing that for us. In Southern California, we have a similar program on September 19th. That's quite a ways away. That one is at the Laguna Hills Community Center. And then our legislative update and educational seminar is November 14th, 2026. That's where we go through all of the legislation from the current session, that which passed and that which failed, and we discuss it. Usually Nathan McGuire does that one for us for Echo, and then we'll go into some other programs as time permits. So that one is November 14th. It usually is in Walnut Creek at Rossmore, but this year we moved it to San Ramon to make it a little more accessible to more people. And so we hope that you'll be put that on your calendar and participate. We are really excited to have a new program that we're introducing called Our Town. And we have the slide up now. You can see it. I'm going to pass this over to Connor, and he's going to say a few words about Our Town. It's a project he's managing. And thank you all for coming today. We will stay a little bit. We are going to be we're late as it is. We're at 2:30. We'll be a couple minutes late, and we'll probably take a couple of your questions afterwards, just because we have so many questions to answer. Connor, take her away, please.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Echo Our Town is a community platform that we are just now rolling out to a minority of our beta testers. It will be live for all of our users here shortly. It's a platform. One side of it works sort of like a social media platform with only Echo members involved. So if you're a member of Echo, you can reach out and talk to other Echo members. You can have community-focused chats in there as well. You can have only your HOA in specific communities. It's a great tool to be able to interact with other board members throughout the state of California and to interact with us at Echo, because you're able to ask us questions directly through that platform. So it's a very good program on that side. And then on the other side, we have the Exchange platform, which allows us to provide an opportunity for HOAs without a public-facing presence on the World Wide Web to get one and actually have a place where they can send their homeowners to grab things. It also allows them to put up local vendors that may work inside the community or even community members themselves and get them to be able to share their services with people within inside the community in an easy way. Also has access to all of our Echo materials on there. So if your community, you want to get your community more involved with our educational program, like today's free webinar, that is a good place that you can put that information up, and then you can provide that link to all of your community members and hopefully get them a little bit more educated and engaged inside of your community. It's a great program. If you're interested in learning more or in joining the beta test, feel free to email me. My email is at the bottom of that screen there, and I would love to have you join the program and walk through it. We just did an intro on Monday this week with our first round of beta testers, and that will also be available for you to watch as well if you do want to know more information.
Yeah, one thing about this, Connor, is that it is free to all of our community members. It's an added value to all of the community members of Echo.
Now for a couple other things here, our webinars that we have coming up in the next month or so. We have our educational workshop on board ethics that's coming up next week on Wednesday and Thursday. That's also part of the HOA University. So if you're already signed up for that, you're already registered. If you want to register for that, the link is available on our screen, and we will be sending an email after today's presentation that will invite you to register for that as well. On March 25th, excuse me, we have our Ask the Experts on construction and maintenance. We have a bunch of experts in various fields that will be talking about HOA maintenance. If we will be sending out the final list of speakers next week, so if you are interested in attending that, keep a lookout for the thing we are sending out next week. And last one we have here on April 16th, we have our community conversation on making sense of HOA re-roofing and board responsibility. This one we have Donna Vingo coming out and actually talking about roofing projects in HOA communities. She's a very valuable resource and knows a lot about HOA roofing projects. So if that's something that you are looking into doing in the summer or are looking to plan for next year, that'll be a great presentation for you to go to. And last but not least, we have our Echo Board Members Club. The next meeting is April 14th. We talk among our group here. The Board Members Club is a members only Echo Club. They meet every second Tuesday of the month from 5:30 to 7. It's only open to board members or former board members. So you're talking to other board members about their associations. We normally give some topics at the beginning of the program that we will talk through. It's a great place to meet other people and to meet your fellow board members throughout the state of California. So it's a good place to come get some information. As long as you're a board member, former board member, and a member, you're able to join. If you want the sign up link for that, my email is on the screen. Feel free to let me know. And last but not least, as a reminder as well, this was recorded, and if you want to share this with your community, feel free to. I will be sending out the final version once it's uploaded to YouTube.